A lot of people that are working in GenAI in these big pharma companies, their focus for 2025 is getting that user adoption. And that's something where I think client services will be great at supporting their clients through that journey because of all the softer skills that you would have if you work in that job. And I think it's definitely a pain point.
Welcome to episode 131. Now, if you are a healthcare communications agency owner or an account manager working in healthcare communications, and you're looking to stay ahead in the ever-evolving world of pharmaceutical marketing, then this episode is for you. Today, I'm joined in the studio by Jonathan Gwillim and Kate Eversole from PharmaBrands Europe. They are the organisers of the upcoming Age of AI event, which, if you're listening or watching this at the beginning of 2025, is happening on March the 4th in London. This is Europe's leading conference in GenAI in healthcare marketing, and it features expert speakers from companies like Google, AstraZeneca, Novartis, ITV, Novo Nordisk, Boehringer Ingelheim, and many, many more. In this episode, Jonathan and Kate share lots of insights about how healthcare agencies and their clients are using Gen AI right now. They also share how creative directors feel about Gen AI's impact on the industry. And Kate also shares practical steps you can take as an account manager to confidently embrace AI in your role and some tips for having conversations with your clients. Now, time flew past in this episode, and I'm sure we could have spoken for much longer. So if you're curious about real-world AI use cases, you're looking for actionable advice, or you just want to stay ahead of the curve, then this episode is packed with inspiration and takeaways to help you embrace AI and future-proof your agency. So let's dive in. You've got a big event coming up. Mm-hmm. So Jonathan, maybe you could sort of create some context by talking a bit about why are we so focused now as marketing agencies and marketers on generative AI?
So the trend, I think there's a macro trend going on globally at the moment, like before we kind of come into marketing and comms specifically. And that is kind of like markets are strained. There's, recessions are looming, especially European markets are under a lot of pressure. And companies are looking for efficiencies. They're looking to do more with less, which has always been a thing in companies. But now there's an accessible tool or an accessible way to achieve that. And it's bearing a lot of fruit quickly. And it's moving really fast. So I think it's front and center within our space, within, pharma and marketing and comms more than ever, because it's achievable, it's seeable, it's reachable. It's not an abstract thing. And that's coming from a, if you like, political market level down into and down through companies at a scale we've not seen before. If we just consider that GPT growth, we've all seen the curve of adoption, or it's not even a curve, it's a rocket ship of adoption. Like this is this is our kind of new reality that we're getting to grips with. So bring that down to a work level, like you can't not see it, breathe it, feel it. We're all kind of experiencing the need to understand it and move. So from our perspective, when we're researching with industry or agencies, and they have marketing, they have the normal kind of challenges of it, that go through. The big question mark is around that. How do we adopt and work with this new future? What does it look like, and where do we invest? And I know we're going to unpick it a bit further, but for us, it's the right place to be. It's the right conversation to have at this moment in time.
Okay. I mean, Kate, maybe you want to add to that, and just why do you think it's so important, specifically for agencies? Because a lot of agencies are listening right now. Yeah. Why do we need to pay attention to this?
So I would say, why now? Let's just take a look at the last week. So the government, who are not usually the most, we don't usually look to the government for innovation. They've released their action plan on AI. I think Keir Starmer said, what was his words? This is the opportunity of our generation. So like John was saying, macro, it's here. And if we look at, in the last week, the World Economic Forum released their annual job report. So I've got a few stats, so I don't want to get them wrong. So let me read them out. So half of employers plan to reorientate their business in response to AI. 2/3 plan to hire talent with specific AI skills. And 40% anticipate reducing their workforce where AI can automate tasks. So I think like 2025, AI is here. So if agencies aren't getting on board, they're going to be left behind. We were talking in the prep about potentially we see a new future of where there are AI-led agencies. So that's happening. And I think we need to get on board.
Yeah. I mean, Jonathan, there's a lot of agency owners who are slowly adopting AI tools, getting their team skills up to date. What's your view on, or maybe your observations for kind of what's changed? Have you seen some specific milestones, or maybe you've had conversations with people in the industry?
Yeah, we have lots of conversations, and it's one of the luxuries of the job that we get insights to that, both on the agency side and on the client side, the manufacturer side as well. And I think one thing to call out is there's a huge discrepancy in what we see. Like just the other day, I'm on a committee in Canada on AI, and it's made up of agency and pharma. And the difference is chalk and cheese between what people are doing. And this is everything from what we'd call literacy, so understanding tools, processes, governance, everything within it, from one company to the other, which I'd call very much a trendsetter, winning awards, pushing the boundaries. And we can give some examples of what that is later on. So it's being discussed everywhere, but there's no consistent, like all agencies are now 20% and they're all moving to 30%. Some have got it and are investing heavily and running and seeing great fruits from it. Like of all the things you can expect, like just achieving more with so much less. And others are still talking about, should we be using ChatGPT? Like, is it safe? How does legal get involved? Those kind of 101 governance infrastructure models. So across the board, everyone's speaking about it. It's being adopted at varying levels. And I think Kate's got some great examples, like in the creativity event that we ran as well, like the agency panel, and we can share some of this content, spoke about how they're using it kind of week in, week out to enhance that kind of client experience and ideation. So yes, hearing it constantly, there's huge variation. And we hope with the events and education and everything else that the normal level becomes higher this year, because 27, 28 and so forth, it's going to be a different world.
Perhaps you could share some of that insight into what happened at that event, because for agencies listening to this, they are super curious at learning about use cases that they can use in their day-to-day. So what came up in the event, and share some examples?
Yeah, so this was a panel with creative directors from a lot of big agencies, and they all said they were using GenAI, especially for pitches, which we know it can be long nights for 2 weeks, for ideas, for insight, content generation. And they were saying that they're all of them are using GenAI to get their work 80% of the way there. And I'd like to also add that these aren't creative directors that we got that love GenAI. We got them because they're great creative directors talking about creativity, and GenAI was just a question that came up. Yeah. So it seems to be getting more and more mainstream. And I think anything that can help you save time, especially with pitches, to get those ideas from that starting point is super, super helpful.
And just to build on that, so going to the AI conference we ran in Toronto, and we had, there's some brilliant talks, but kind of one of the things that came away in the feedback was what people really took was that GenAI or AI will give us the age of the average. And they gave examples of how big brands had used AI for their meta descriptions, for their promotional campaigns. And they were leading with this and pushing out. And if you did a ChatGPT search of like, give me 10 campaign ideas or 10 slogans, it kicked it out. And then you had this huge, I forget the actual brand, but this huge brand that was running with it. And then the ChatGPT example. Now, had ChatGPT found it or has it co-created it? So the recommendation was within the talk, and that was from Contagious now, was, to Kate's point, get you to the 70, 80%, but don't stop. Like that's just saved you a week or so many days worth of work, but now bring the magic, bring the creativity. And one of the things we talk about in the report we're pushing out is don't forget we're human. We run events for a reason, and that we believe this is really important. Like we can't just automate and prompt everything to the next stage, because it will lose the element of what humanity and everything's about, creativity and excitement. So I think these tools, and what we heard from the agencies and when we speak to people, is it can help us move a lot faster to be better in what we're doing, not to necessarily just do all of our job for us. And that's a huge area, and that's a huge debated topic, and depends who you listen to and go different ways. But we have a view that it can make us all better at what we do versus replacing.
And to give another example that's quite tangible, I can't tell you who, but a big privately owned agency who are awesome and do lots of good work and win lots of awards, did a brand planning session for their client in half a day and did their year brand planning, all using GenAI tools.
Lovely.
Yeah.
So we've talked about ideation, helping creative directors, and now we're talking about brand planning. Can you dive into a bit more of that example, just to bring it to life? Do you know how they approached the brand planning, what kind of tools they used?
Yeah, so they started with insight. So they used medical reports, previous brand plans, anything they had from the client, previous work. They put it all into the tool to get kind of key recommendations, key stats, and they did that very quickly. They put into the tool what makes a good brand plan, and then they used a different tool to make the content, and then they used like tools for developing images, developing copy to show how some campaigns could bring to life. So they used a variety of tools, from insight to recommendations to then prompting it to deliver what some actual campaigns could do.
And in terms of like the action, so some of their tools are things they've built internally or refined. ChatGPT, is front and center for analysis, and the O3 model in particular has been game changing. And you can see the research of how it's outperforming kind of all of us now on almost every level when it comes to knowledge and now reasoning, which is like the big thing. If you with the Sam Altmans of the world with AGI and ASI, like what does that mean? And its reasoning capability is there, which is so important in strategy, of course, of like making sense of what I have and making those future recommendations. So what they did is exactly as Kate mentioned, but at a huge scale. And this was like a very savvy senior strategist. So they know what good is as an output. So, and they were able to create the environment needed. I think that's the big thing. You can't just upload into ChatGPT and hope it kicks it out. You need to know how to create those GPTs, those closed environments, and only look within the relevant data. And he is able to prompt and push and tweak to get it to a point that when it came out, he was like, this is good. Like, this would be a lot of work for a team over, a couple of weeks to get to this point in a complex area. So it's a great example of, what are all those people now going back to the jobs and work? All those people haven't been involved that would have historically been involved. So, it's an N of one, and who knows how to use it well within the platform has got to a great place.
The impact is potentially huge, isn't it? And I loved what you just said there, Jonathan, about, understanding or having a judgment that it's good or not. Because if you're using these tools willy-nilly and there's an output, you might assume, because you don't have the experience, you don't have the expertise, that that's good, but actually it's not.
Yeah, and to know when something's being naughty. So I like it too, and I heard with the Marketing AI Institute, they speak greatly to this, like treat the tools like you would an intern or a junior member of staff. And they start on day one, they start January 1st, and by July 1st, they're going to be good enough to kind of let them loose to do their thing. And if you're not training them, communicating with them, learning what they need, and vice versa on that journey, you're not going to get the most of that member of staff. And it's the same with the tools. Like if you just log in, chuck in a prompt that you've seen or heard or made up, and it kicks out some rubbish, or made stuff up. And I can give examples where we've done research and it's made up the quotes, made up the data points, made up the references. And I've seen credible companies who have put references in that don't exist. And I've seen how, for example, ChatGPT will make up a reference and then justifies why it's done it. But to your point, you need to know what the platform's going to do. If you treat it in a certain way, it will just kick out. It's kind of, the old crap in, crap out scenario. So
yeah, and to build, you need to know what good looks like. So I think we're saying that, I think we're coming back to this point, GenAI can get you 80% of the way there, but you need someone to know, someone experienced, someone who's done the role, someone to be able to check. Just to give examples of like what I do every day. Like I use GenAI every day and have done for years to help me be more efficient. But I still need to proof it. If it's doing copy, it needs to sound like my tone of voice, and it almost gets it quite there, but sometimes it goes a bit too far. So I don't think jobs are necessarily just going to disappear. I think they're going to change. I think we're going to talk about the role of agents a little bit later. I think that's going to be a big trend, especially for where digital agencies want to be. And to develop a good agent is, like you were saying about an intern, you're going to need humans behind it to make sure it's behaving well, to make sure it's doing what you need it to do, to make sure it's doing what you need to do safely. You're going to need humans to check that. So, yeah.
Going back to your event with creative directors, a couple of questions. Was that pharma specific?
Yeah.
And was it in Canada or was it UK, US?
In Canada.
It was in Canada, but some of the agencies were global agencies. Yeah, like we had a few boutique, but a lot of when we reference are the big players of the world who have, multi-market, multi-scale.
Yeah, the top 5 agencies were there.
Interesting. Yeah. So we've talked about ideation, we talked about brand planning. What other examples came up in that event where creative directors were actively using the tools?
Well, we can go, I think maybe to jump from creative directors as well to actual manufacturers. So the example around copywriting, medical copywriting is a big area. So AZ spoke on their use of Jasper. That's their tool of choice globally they're rolling out. And again, a journey of learning to refine. So, and that's, as you know, a huge area of time, writing, the review, and then back and forth with the manufacturer back to the agency. And they've been able to bring that pretty much in-house. And his point within that was it a 50% reduction in time for creation? And this is them just getting going. But his point as well was we as a team internally got it 50% of the way there. Then they got their agency to make it great, to do the build on top of that, to bring those external expertise. Now in a few years' time, how will that look? But that was, I'd say that was a powerful kind of example on the day of within the copywriting sphere and one of the popular tools.
Very interesting. And you can't help but think, gosh, where is it going for agencies? I mean, I'm jumping around a little bit with my questions, but let's just roll with it because I'm sure other people listening to what you've just explained, AZ, huge pharma company that employs loads of agencies, have effectively brought 50% of their copywriting in-house just to get them started with the tools they've got. Yeah. So their expectation is that their agencies are going to be spending less time. Talk to me about what that perception currently is.
And I can, and to build as well, so Pfizer came out with, and their kind of global partnership with Publicis on their AI tool, and this is well documented, it's out there. And they built what they called Charlie, their kind of internal GenAI tool. And it's in the same vein of, if you read through the articles, it's very much a marketer or a brand manager has to do research, has to align with stakeholders, has to know a market analysis, has to create content, has to get it approved, has to do the creative element, go through the cycles, have so many banner ads and get them approved. And that first kind of almost not chaos, but that is the work. It's that kind of complex stakeholder role. So one of the early things they did was just to bring that together and through GenAI tools, but just use the current technology as a dashboard in front. So how's my brand performing? Where's, almost like a PM board. How am I progressing on certain tasks? What do I need to create? And then the next phase is I can actually change it myself. I can edit the content. I can deploy to medical with a probability that it's 80% accurate or compliant. I can edit this imagery because it's integrated into Adobe. ChatGPT is running there for the copywriting and the editing. So Pfizer is another public example that's out there. And many are, to be honest, you would Novo
Nordisk have been using GenAI for years now. They're definitely in our space, one of the forerunners. And they use it across their whole business. So from R&D, and I think there's a lot of great examples in pharma about how they use it in R&D, but not so much in kind of our space of marketing, comms, copy, creative, and they're doing it. And they're doing it for content generation. They're doing it for image generation. They're doing it for copy, and it's there. And I would say one of the things so we're speaking to people in this space all the time in terms of there's these roles now for GenAI. And one of their biggest challenges, which is something that I think client services will be great at, because any person that's amazing at client services, it's their softer skills that are that shine through, is that adoption piece, that stakeholder management piece. So they seem to have the tools and they can do things, but the adoption throughout the companies is low. And a lot of people that are working in GenAI in these big pharma companies, their focus for 2025 is getting that user adoption. And that's something where I think client services will be great at supporting their clients through that journey because of all the softer skills that you would have if you work in that job. And I think it's definitely a pain point. So if I was in an agency now and I was with a client, that's where I'd be talking to them about a few things. I'd be trying to get on the phone with their GenAI lead because they exist now. There's someone in there that's probably got GenAI in their job title that's responsible for the tools. And I bet you they will want to talk to you because of exactly what I said. Their role is getting people to use these tools. And if they do talk to you, and if they don't talk to you, that's fine. Get your client to talk to them. And I would be asking them 3 things. What's your tech stack? Because if you understand your tech stack, you can suggest ideas that will fit and they can do and you can execute. I would then understand what tools they've got. What are they using? What works? What doesn't? The last bit, I would check to see if they've got a governance structure in place, because the last thing you want to do is, as an agency, and I've been there, you come up with an amazing idea, your client sold it, and your scope of work's there, and you start to deliver it, and you're like, oh my God, this is going to take months and loads of extra hours, and then it's painful for all. So you need to understand what the governance is in place, and lo and behold, business opportunity. If the governance isn't in place, that's where I'd be first starting to play as an agency. Right, we will help you set up your governance structure. We will help you with that stakeholder adoption. We will help you with training internally so people can use these tools. As an agency, I'd be asking those 3 things, and then I'd be trying to sell them services around supporting them with governance, supporting them with guidelines, supporting them to deliver a very sensible pilot so that you've got a nice user case, and supporting them with training. That's where I would be playing at the moment, and I'd be having those conversations.
So helping them create AI policies to work with other, not only adoption internally in the company stakeholders, but also with their other suppliers.
Exactly. So think of it, the best way I would say to think of it is, remember social media about 10 years ago? Dust off those slides.
But wait, Kate, I'm surprised that more companies don't have these policies and the governance in place. Are you saying that that's still evolving?
Yeah. I've spoke to a pharma company last week, and it's a guy who runs their digital, and they've been told from global they're not going to use GenAI. And his view is the world's changing. We need to get on board. So that's one example of a small to mid-sized pharma company that's got pushback from using GenAI. So they have nothing in place, and the world's going to change. Some of the larger pharma companies do, but they're definitely the discussions we're having are around setting up governance and how to do that, and how do we get that buy-in. So that internal training element, and that kind of, whether it's using ambassadors, however you do it, I think that's definitely... that's the conversations that we're having at the moment.
And I'd go back to my previous point of it's chalk and cheese. You know, if you look at Sanofi as an example, really mature on the commercial side, obviously Pfizer, and a lot of the pharma companies are showcasing and making a song and dance, and there is a little bit of smoke and mirrors to it, but some have real maturity behind the scenes. There's organizations like Responsible AI who will come and who have blueprints, templates, and run events and workshops on this, and they're good to follow in terms of setting up governance. And they bring a lot of cross-industry, because some things are healthcare or vertical specific, but in general, it's about data privacy. It's about process. They are almost replicable things that can be put across. But to your points, I think, what can agencies do? If people are bringing things in-house, like, they have to evolve with it. And, we're touch on agents. And I think if your agency of record or your partner isn't coming forward or isn't ahead of these tools and talking about this stuff and pressure testing and innovating, I think companies are going to be like, well, we can do this ourselves, or we'll recruit that Gen AI person from your agency or somebody else's and bring them in. And then suddenly you will see them part ways of where it is, because it's in a couple of years, it's going to be the norm. It's going to be a right to play of, well, you can do a brand plan in a day, or you could do this analysis, which is already, within minutes versus hours. This needs to be there. So if this isn't how agencies and companies are talking, coming in, I just think clients will probably shut down quite quickly.
So we've talked a lot about GenAI sort of helping a lot with the execution, a lot with speeding up tasks. For agencies looking ahead, what is left for them to offer? How would you recommend an agency thinks about their own services moving forward, particularly in healthcare, given that we're talking specifically about pharma companies?
Great question.
Yeah, so
and I'd caveat we're not experts.
No,
within,
but we're just hypothesizing.
Futures. Yeah,
I can take this.
Yeah, go for it.
So again, I would talk about governance, because I think they're all going to need help with governance. AI literacy is low, so I would after that, then I'd be talking about agents. So an agent is how I would describe it. And John, you can build on this, is think of it like a bot that can go in and do elements of your job. You train it to do a little bit of your job and it will do it better than you. It will do it quicker than you. If I was a digital agency, I would be focusing my effort on creating agents to do roles within my agency to make our output more quicker, more effective. But also, what agents can I use to support my pharma company? What could I do to help them with their organic social posts? What can I do to help them at Congress? Could I, for example, like the GenAI toys that exist now, you could go to Congress, you could take a poster presentation, and in real time, you can translate that poster presentation into key outputs and translate them into local language and get that out there. That's the age we're coming into, and tools exist to be able to do that. So I would be talking about agents, and I'd be talking about using GenAI to deliver quicker, more effective, more localized, more personalized comms.
So to be the expert in the room about how the client can deploy AI to help them in their role. And you've given some brilliant examples. What about the strategic kind of creative thinking part of what the agency does? Because a lot of what we're talking about is the technicalities of getting stuff done. But presumably there's going to be a lot of off-the-shelf solutions in the future that they can just use rather than the agency being involved. So I'm just curious to know your thoughts on, you know, where the kind of more typical strategic advice, market thoughts, you know, giving the agency's kind of trusted advisor perspective on their strategy.
So I know this is like closer to your world, but I'll go back to the earlier point of kind of, we can't forget that we're human, and we can't forget the soft skills, and we can't forget that people buy, in a B2B sense, people still buy from people. Like the 7-figure deals, the 6-figure deals are not done like a SaaS form where you log in, you click, you see it, and then you do your monthly subscription like ChatGPT. I can't see that changing anytime soon. I can't see procurement, finance, people signing off huge agreements for global rollouts through a good landing page that's optimized to their locality in Paris, wherever it is. I just can't see that on a human-to-human level. And I think agencies shouldn't take the eye off the ball. And many companies do take their eye off the ball now on this of how do you teach executives, creative leads to be better communicators, better presenters. You can be an expert within your area to understand the condition, the remit and all that good stuff. But are they not resonating well? Are they not doing all the things that actors, for example, are phenomenal at? You know, you can put an actor on a stage or in a pitch and they'd win everything because they're great at telling those stories. So I think agencies of the future, one, to all Kate's points, technically they have to be on it. They need that talent in-house, or they need to be upskilling so they can joust and be on par with others. But then they also need to invest in the talent to win and tell stories and to win hearts and minds through on a person-to-person level. And I think if you double down on one or the other, you're going to lose. You can't. And agencies are very good, you know, with pitching and the process. So I don't think that's going to change. The types, the volume of content, the expectation of data that those people will have, I just think it's going to be so much higher. Like they're going to be expected to understand and know so much about the personas, the people, the markets, the impact, and the forecasting. Like if we do this campaign in this way, the chances are based on this data, you're going to have this much market penetration, because they'll have, you know, from your metadata or whatever campaigns, they'll know how those things are going to convert. based on the visual of the face, how the eyes are looking, everything will give probability scores. So it's going to be the same, but better and much higher. And I know who I would pick. If somebody came in, an agency, and was like, your campaign's going to do this, and we believe it for these reasons, and they're connecting with me, and they're on budget, to someone with, we believe this could win for the following reasons, they're missing that kind of AI gap, if you will, opportunity.
Who do you think is at the forefront of this? Like, do you know any agencies specifically who you think are just at the cutting edge of what's changing?
Yes.
That people should be looking towards to emanate?
Yeah, so I can talk about this, and I can give us a shameless plug, because we are doing an event on GenAI for healthcare. And to be totally transparent, there are two agencies that we called at the start, Click and Syneos, who are both involved, and they're both presenting. And one of the reasons they're presenting is because we believe that the work they're doing is on the forefront. Syneos have been in this space for years, and they're actually presenting their key lessons from using GenAI in healthcare. They've delivered some of the first time campaigns for some healthcare companies, including AstraZeneca. So they're doing some great stuff. Click, now we haven't spoke, and I would like to talk about MLR, so the medical, legal and regulatory process, because I think that's going to be where we can see some real major wins. Like, anyone in account management has lost time, probably a few tears, to the MLR process. So for anything you do, you need to get reviewers from each of those three stakeholders, and they need to sign it off. And it is not easy. It is not an easy process. So to give you an example, I can walk you through an example. Very recent, in the last year, I'd been working with a client 4 years, loved them, and we did some great stuff. We did some first-time campaigns. We ran a lot of their organic and paid social campaigns. And a reviewer changed. So one of the reviewers changed, and she didn't use social. So she didn't understand the tech. She didn't understand where the ads were going. And she wasn't happy with the governance that had been in place and had been approved from global. She wasn't happy with some of the other kind of FAQs and standard docs we had to do with it. So we had to change everything to kind of upskill her. And part of that was educating her on how to use social, which I think would be the same with using reviewers with GenAI. And we had to tweak the way we did things for approval just to get it live. Now, that was painful for the agency. It was painful for everyone working on it, because it took hours, and it was like last minute changes because we had a timeline. Things needed to go live by a certain date. And it was painful for the client, because the client had a real hard time trying to get that stakeholder on board. Now, some of the stuff that Click are doing are looking at the MLR process so that you can use that to research previous campaigns and what's been approvable, and what content's been approved, why. So all those questions she had, she could have logged in to see that it was safe, see that we've done it before, see previous examples, and it would have taken her 5 minutes. And I really think that MLR space is kind of ripe for change, because it's painful, it's timely, it's costly, it's not efficient, and it often changes based on people's opinion rather than actual the regulations. And I think GenAI is a great place. And there's a lady from Click called Julie who's amazing, and she's speaking on exactly that.
Incredible. Yeah. That sounds, you're absolutely right. What's one of the major pain points. Exactly. Anyone in healthcare comms, in account management, knows that. So,
and on the way in, actually, I saw from a post on LinkedIn from Rory Sutherland from Ogilvy, and he spoke pretty much not within healthcare, but explicitly how he sees the potential of AI in the future. And that was, I won't do justice to his post, he's brilliant when he speaks, but it's there now to convince the approval people that it's safe to use. Because if the tool says it's 90% accurate or 95% good to go, chances are it's going to move quicker, where before you had creative people and copywriters and everything trying to convince the legal department or the MD that this is going to be great and it's not going to destroy the brand. He said, so yeah, it's kind of, you live in this future where basically blame the AI or blame the tool if it goes wrong as a way forward. And it speaks to that. I mean, he's kind of tongue in cheek in a lot of what he says, and he's brilliant. But to Kate's point, like, to build on as well, I was on with Click actually on a call the other day, and we're talking around this, and a life science company just by chance said their biggest challenge was this area, pre-approval, getting content in, getting stakeholders together, understanding good, understanding the past. And by chance, they were on the call and they said, oh, they had an internal competition. That's how this thing was made. And the tool's called Guardrail. And it was made by a member of the team, or I think 2 members, 2 from the medical team and a project manager or something like that. And they all submitted internally. And this is one of the winning prizes. And it was from a panel of pharma executives picking which tools would be the most transformative internally. And this is one of the front runners. So yeah, the time that's going to be saved, it will be phenomenal, like significantly through this.
But again, I bring us back to that governance piece. Like, I have spent so long.
break governance down for someone listening, because maybe you've given them a seed of an idea that they can take to their clients. So when you say do some governance or help them with break that down.
So process. So what is the process? If I'm using GenAI, what process can I go through to get this approved? Who are the key stakeholders that need to be involved? And what are the key principles that I'm aligning to? They're kind of the 3 bits that I'd put into any kind of governance doc. So what is the process, including kind of timelines? Who are the key stakeholders? And I think, and what are the key principles that you always adhere to? Because once you've got that in place, they're your guardrails, they're your rules. Then you can start using these tools, but you need to have that there, especially in these big companies, and you need to have that buy-in often from above so that you can start to execute things, because otherwise we're going to have a time where people are playing with this at home and they're using it in their day-to-day lives, but they can't execute anything internally. And the companies that are set up for this and are confident that it's safe, confident that it's scalable, because they have their governance frameworks in place, will be flying.
Yeah.
So
what are the big no-nos? If, for example, someone's listening to this and they know that they have no guardrails in place, but they're really keen to kind of keep up with what's changing. Just give us some kind of ABC of, if you're in an account management, don't do this, do this, until you've got something more formalized in place.
So I think, most people are familiar with GDPR now in terms of privacy and personal information and anything sensitive. So if you have your own version of ChatGPT or free anything, free Jasper, free Perplexity, whatever your weapon of choice is that you want to play with, just use a bit of common sense. Like, if your company hasn't approved it and there isn't a policy in place, like, use it with fake data, use it to play with. Don't say, oh, I work at X and here is their brand plan and their data, and upload it and hope. Because OpenAI is pretty open with this, is that they steal everything. They train their models on your content. And, there's obviously ring-fenced versions of platforms, but, which is great. It's another topic, but we live in the time where these models have learned from just absorbing everybody else's content to train themselves.
Is there any level of OpenAI's ChatGPT tool yet that is private?
Yeah,
or
so
doesn't matter if
you're levels will ring fence data. Same with Jasper, same with Claude. Like, Anthropic, they will ring fence and not release it, and that's how the big players get in. Now and I'm not a techie, but I do believe it's great because how it's de-identifying and anonymizing. But the big pharma companies especially are not sharing all that data with OpenAI to go and train its models elsewhere. Otherwise, we would be seeing all that data being served up in our own queries and our own kind of things we're doing. So that capability of ring-fenced data is there. And I believe the GPTs even can do that to a degree as well. And within your own settings within OpenAI, you can go in there and say, do not use my data to train other things. The vast majority...
Whether you trust that or not is up to you.
Yeah, that's a really good point, yeah. And OpenAI said, we may use everything we see forever to possibly train our models. So I think that's the trade-off between... I think as companies, it's a trade-off between what they know and what they're willing to allow to stay up to speed. But back to the question around kind of what to do and the governance piece, use common sense. Like, I forget the platform. It was a note-taking service that somebody had within Teams within a VC, and the data of it was pulled. It went on TechCrunch or something like that. I'll have to dig it out. And the summary it found or kicked out was from another VC conversation that somebody had that day. And it was about not just the conversation, it was the after call of like the summary, and it kicked out these notes, or somebody could query it and get access to all the information that they'd spoken about and all the kind of personal information. Now, I'm sure there's loads of these examples. And I would say any new startup platform that's built on top of one of the bigger players, look with caution and just play with for fun or understanding, and put your time into the Geminis, the Googles and the people that have serious money and infrastructure to stand up. That's number one, to play, and just don't put anything sensitive into it that could cause a lot of problems. And then if you're moving to it and it's going into your organization, to your question around how do you know the data's not being used and whatnot, that's where you need to live. Like, what does our ring-fenced environment really look like so it's safe, so we don't destroy the brand we're working with by uploading all their information accidentally?
I was actually listening to your podcast, because you've got a podcast, and I heard that Moderna have given GPT to everybody in their company.
Yep.
So there must be some kind of ring fencing.
100%.
Yeah, so I can kind of answer that. So what a lot of the pharma companies are doing, like John touched on this, but they're making their own GPTs. So they're working with OpenAI and Microsoft to make their own GPTs, which they're then training themselves. And then they can provide it with the data for it to learn, and they can provide it with the guardrails to play in. But the tricky thing is, what John was saying is around kind of that bit of data, because as an agency, you need to be sure if you're training it with client materials, has your client given you access to upload them to your GPT?
Exactly, yeah.
And I think that's where you need to have a think. I was going to kind of answer the question in a bit of a more positive way, of like, instead of what shouldn't you be doing, what can you be doing? And if I was an account manager, I would firstly be looking at MSAs. I can't think of an MSA that I was working on, which was until this summer, that included information on GenAI.
Really good point.
So as an account manager, I would be looking at that, because that's where you should be containing your information about what legally you can use, what tools you should be using, how you should be doing that data. And there's some really good information on kind of what you should be like how you could be phrasing that, because obviously this is a new thing. It's not something we've been using for years, on the Marketing AI Institute. So we can send you the link and you can kind of share it, because I think that will provide people a really good starting point.
It's a really brilliant point, Kate. I've had a couple of people on the show actually for agencies in the UK that want to stay ahead of AI policy legally. There's the company Hybrid Legal, and I'll do a plug for them. And also Sharon Torek from Torek Law in the US, who's again at the forefront for agencies around the AI policy. So thank you for flagging that. Jonathan, anything else to add to? Well, there's one big thing that you said earlier on about kind of the evolving business model for agencies, because pricing is obviously going to be a big discussion point here. If everything's taking nanoseconds and we used to charge by the hour, how do you see that whole situation playing out?
It's a great, complex and sensitive question. And I know you have a view. I will hand this over to Kate.
I've got a strong view on this.
I think to start with, I think the price per hour model is going to shrink or has to be challenged. I just, people can't work that way anymore. And will it be price per output? Will, much like an a la carte menu, will you pick the items you want that have an amount, and then the quality of them will be based on how good that agency or that company is to deliver it? And you may see the removal of certain items because they're just inefficient. I think about agile as a way of working. A lot of what I see with GenAI and agencies working is having an agile methodology versus your more traditional waterfall. And that works for lots of good reasons. And agile's hard to do. If you're a product person, that will make more sense. But like, we work in an agile way and it works really well. Like, we work with our partners in an agile way. So we'll sit down with a problem with all the tech stacks open around us, and we'll just get it done in that hour, 2 hour window. Now, if that was a traditional, that would be, meeting, alignment on goals, brief, approval, do the work, submit the work, does it work, test it. And you could be anything from a tracking pixel to a banner ad or a website. So I think that will fundamentally change. And to the pricing point, I think companies will say, you know what, we can do this for X plus whatever margin on top. So it's just going to cost Y as a bundle, as a thing. And they have to get it done. That's what my spider senses tell me, that it will be more just item based, more turnkey pricing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and that's where, if we look at kind of the big consultancies, that's how they play now. I personally hate the charge by hour model. I think it's dated.
I think we all do.
I think
Kate.
it never works. I think you end up having this tango with the client and they say, oh, well, actually, why don't you just do 10 hours on this, because I know you and I know you can do it and you don't need all those people. And then you end up doing 20 hours on it, but you save here. It's never... like, that's the world we work in, and it's never exactly right. So I don't think that traditional pricing model works, and I like charging by deliverable. I think it's much more transparent. I think everyone's clear on the goals that you've got to deliver, and that's where agencies are going. I think if you look at, like I said, I think the top 5 consultancies are moving towards this model of charging by deliverable, and I think we're going to see that more and more and more with GenAI.
It's definitely a theme that has been coming up on the podcast as well. I had Tim Williams from Ignition Consulting Group, who's a pricing specialist. Okay. And, traditionally we've had sort of inputs based pricing, and now it's moving to outputs, so products and programs, and even outcomes in some instances.
And to build upon that, like it gets really contractually and legally hard. But why not risk share agreements? Why can't brands, if you think of Michael Jordan, how he made his money, like he made pennies on the shoe, it was huge and it was game changing back in the day. If Stephen Bartlett, he made a huge chunk of money because he had shares in the biotech company that he was doing social media for and it blew up, and that paid dividends. So if companies are confident in their output, and they can have much more confidence now because the data's available, they can predict the outcome, the impact, hopefully. And why not say, you know what, we'll do it for X, but we want 1% of the upside. And that could be, fractional because you're going to IPO or we're going to help you overhit. So then companies say, well, look, there's no risk from our side. You're just taking a piece of anything on top of what you're offering. And again, if you want to disrupt that model in that space, and I get it's incredibly complex, especially if to have that with a big pharma company, for example. But it's a new model. It's a new way of thinking. And it's like, okay, it helps manage P&L in the short term at least. And it's all new money to some extent. And
to our point again about agencies, one of the things I would also be trying to do is talk to procurement to see how they want to set these things up, to see what their terms are, to see what they're doing. Because like I said, MSAs are going to change. The rules you have to play in are going to change. And I think procurement do have a role, and they will have expectations of how they want their agencies to work. So that would be kind of like, I can see the pricing model changing for sure, but let's get procurement on this journey with us. Absolutely. And let's work with them to deliver something, hopefully, so we don't have to fill in so many awful broken spreadsheets anymore.
And timesheets, no?
Yeah.
Or maybe we'll be doing that internally anyway, I don't know. Any other thoughts, Kate, for account managers listening? Because this is really useful stuff, very pertinent, very on point.
Yeah, so I can use maybe what I do. So I've been using GenAI for years, and I use it in my day-to-day. And obviously I've taken the time to make sure it's set up safely and I'm not putting anything like crazy in there and but little things, changing timelines. I can do that in seconds. Writing copy. I think it's really good for those emails that you have to do when you're a bit more senior, that are kind of HR emails, because it makes sure you cover all the points that you need to. Typos. Like, anyone that's worked with me, like, I'm not great at that, especially proofing my own work. Who is? I use it to proof check a lot of my work for typos. It does it in seconds. There's loads of things that I can just do in my day-to-day that makes it a lot more efficient. The other thing I'd be doing if I was in accounts is speaking to your team, speaking to your senior team. What are you allowed to use? Are you allowed to be playing with ChatGPT? Are you not? If so, what are their plans? Because I think this is the future. And if you're not allowed, download it on your phone and use it in your day-to-day, because it's coming. And I think 2025, like I said, if you're not using ChatGPT, we're talking about people are going to be using agents instead of humans in jobs. So if you're not being allowed to upskill at work, upskill by yourself, and it's quite fun. Where's my local restaurant? What exercises should I do?
To that point, I will share with you, on a personal note, I'm using ChatGPT on my phone. I've got the enterprise level one on my phone. I'm talking to it and saying, look, this is what I've got in my fridge. Make me a recipe.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And also practicing my Spanish, because I used to live in Spain. So I'm just chatting while cooking and having a conversation. So it's phenomenal. What else, Jonathan?
Yeah, I was you've taken one of my examples of voice, of like you move and you communicate differently when you talk to when you type to when you're on stage and everything else. And talking and getting value back in real time, is, as obvious as that sounds, is a game changer. Like, as Siri always aspired to be, is kind of what we now have. So 100%, if you have that version of GPT or others like it, talk to it. Like, just close your laptop, have a chat and brainstorm, have a think about things and challenge it, and then the content's there and you can do things. I found Loom as phenomenal. I've cancelled so many meetings with a client or a sponsor or partner where they wanted an update or needed to see something, and you know how long it takes to make the damn thing with design, and then you write the email about why you've done it, or let's have a call to talk about what feedback. I just do it in Loom. It's a 2 to 5 minute video of the thing, of what I'm doing, the presentation or whatever, with commentary, of course, I'm talking over it. Then they can comment on the timeline of what I've said. So we've just combined with, say, probably an hour, at least an hour, probably 3 of call prep, call happening, follow up and action, where I've just made it a short video. And the AI element is the magic of the transcription, the note taking. If you say to it, next steps or goals are, it will summarize that for you. So it's all of that's gone. Like, I'm not writing that, can you do this? And then they can comment within it, and then it edits it. And it's honestly, week in, week out for client work, it's like, let's cancel our one-to-ones. I'm going to send you the thing and let's have a co-creation session within Canva. Canva's obviously widely used. It's an AI platform to a degree. Beautiful AI. Like, you shouldn't be making PowerPoints. I mean, I still play around in PowerPoint, but aligning boxes, getting your fonts right. Like, make the template in beautiful AI, and it has limitations. Like, it can't do everything, but you'll get 95% there on pretty much all the slides you need to make or do on brand in rapid time. And so that's another great one. Obviously, we've spoken about the text ones. I like Notebook LM, like LLM. Like, I upload, I'm forever doing summaries and content, occasionally creating a podcast for bands. And
that's great, I think, just to bring it back to the audience, for either anyone going to Congress, putting all your publications in there, getting the key highlights out, and for copywriters. It's great.
Great. And I think you said something earlier, which I've seen in practice. A client services director was doing a workshop, and she had all these flip charts, and she took a photo and it instantly translated it into text, so she could just send a little follow-up note. Now, in the old days, that would have taken ages, wouldn't it? You get your flip chart. And so what other examples? I
mean, it's everywhere that we do something manually is there. I think it's, if you're looking at this thinking, where should I start? It's like, well, what do you need? What is the use case that I have day to day? If you're playing around in PM boards and moving tags and tasks, it's like if you're copying data from your CRM of client activity into your project management board, then to brief, like, just say to yourself, stop. Can they talk to each other? Yes, they can. Play in Zapier at a simple level and just get data to start sharing. It will probably save you weeks of work once it's running. And then to Kate's point about agents, can I get ahead of how this could be an agent thing in time? An agent's not a case of a bot comes in and fixes it. It has to be built. It's a technical play of putting it together. So I think the use cases are everywhere. I was on a call, just the other day with a broadcast company, and they've got, their thing is, they've got video, and we'll do the video in real time, and it does transcription in real time and localization, but also will correct wrong terminology in real time when it kicks out. And then you can search on top. Now, if you think of a company, and they've been in media and now they're coming into healthcare, if you've got lots of medical education or lots of training or education, it's, where's that video, or where's that stat, or that thing I said in that video at that time? Now you can just with their platform, just query it. It will find the video and the moment. And then you could pull that out. And you can export straight to social, to Kate's point, if you wanted to share that quote and stat. So you've removed the search, the finding, the export, the download, the upload into Adobe or your whatever editing tool, the editing then into Canva or whatever thing, and then the processing in like search, export, post.
Which tool was that?
This was Series 21. It's like a Spanish name. I'll get the exact thing. I spoke to them just the other day. Right. And again, not known. They're doing some really clever stuff behind the scenes, and they're moving into our space. Because
I was reading, and you probably know this already, but that OpenAI, ChatGPT was going to connect with Google Drive so that you can access all of your files and folders and everything and pull exactly what you need. And it will, and now because it's multimodal, you've got text, image, video, audio, it's just everything. Yeah. So the possibilities are endless, really.
In client services, what you do a lot of, timelines, easy peasy to change, quick updates, easy peasy to create with a decent prompt, briefing, again, easy peasy. I brief people using ChatGPT all the time. You can give it a really decent prompt, some examples, and it will get you, again, 80% of the way there. Proofing things. So again, it can help with typos. It can help you with insight to make sure kind of your checking is on point and your references are correct. Emails, you do a lot of emails. So how can it help you with that? So I think along the whole journey, and proofing spreadsheets. The last thing you want, I think, as an agency is sending out costs or something in a spreadsheet. If that's broken, you can easily do that. So I just think, I know we've talked a lot about the future, but these are like 5 user cases that you can do today and it will save you time, and it will save you time to do some of the harder stuff, some of the big picture thinking, some of the really understanding the nitty gritty of a brand plan. So what we were talking about earlier, yes, AI can help us get to an output quicker, but you as a human, to make decent recommendations and to have those softer skills to understand what you're selling in or getting that stakeholder engagement for, you need to understand them. And you can then spend the time you've saved faffing around with timelines to understand the brand plan, to understand what are your kind of strategic priorities for the next year. And then you can start to think about ideas. So I would just, start small, start playing with things that are very easy to do and will save you time. That's where I'd be playing. And then I'd be focusing on the kind of harder stuff of really understanding the brand plan, where you want to go, and start thinking about some ideas.
That's a really, really good point, Kate. Thank you so much for sharing all those tips, because I'm sure a lot of people listening are thinking, oh my gosh, she's right. Maybe I'm not utilising it enough. And to your point, Jonathan, as well, it's all about identifying what are the problems that I have and stepping back. Like you say, sometimes we don't reflect, do we, enough, because we're very much in the reactive day to day.
Especially in agencies, it's so fast.
It is.
We know how fast it is. We know how high pressured it is. Like, how many times do you have a pitch win and the next no one steps back, or you win an award? Like, you never go, oh, do you know what? We did a really good job.
Yeah.
You go on, it's on to the next thing. So I think there is definitely that stepping back, having a think about what you do in your day-to-day life that's repeatable. That's maybe a bit more slightly
cause
mundane.
Cause
you a headache. And then how can you help?
Lovely, really good. Jonathan, you mentioned that you had done a report with PharmaBrands. Yep. Can you talk a bit to that?
So, in transparency, I was inspired by the 25 questions that Marketing AI Institute did around Christmas time, kind of where their members sent in. And key takeaways from this: if you're not subscribed to that podcast and that institution, they are, in my eyes, at the cutting edge of this stuff. And it helps me cut through the noise and understand things in a marketing-y way that I can understand it and help translate into pharma and healthcare. So I listened to that, took some of the key highlights and points, and then we did some of our own research on things we've spoken about, really, like maturity, confidence, understanding within marketing and communications within healthcare and what AI means. We polled some of our users, which was predominantly pharma and agency. I think it was about 50-50. And the report is simply like, it's very simple to read, like a 2-minute read. It was the goal, but around AI literacy and kind of key action items, things you need to know. It's a lot of what we've spoken about today, in that the world is changing, very simply, the world is changing. Don't be a bystander and observer to this, like, get involved. if you're not getting that support in your company, go out and do it. So, everything we've spoken about, like get up to speed. These are the steps to do it. Governance, safety, don't ruin your career by trying to progress your career. Pilot, experiment, apply. And then there's a few other like examples as we go through within it. So it's a lot of what we've discussed today. We've put a very simple kind of like checklist of things to do over the next few weeks at the end, but it's not a healthcare specific thing, although some examples are in there that we've referenced. And our kind of key message is, for ourselves and for everyone, like you've got to skill up on this stuff. To me, this is more of and I used the social media example of agencies skilling up in the age of social media. To me, it's more of an how the internet changed communications and jobs back in the day. Like roles disappeared that required people and teletext, if you remember, and it all just kind of over a very small period of time, that just went. The travel industry transformed once your Trivagos and your Booking.coms matured, and the self-reviews. All those travel agents were gone. They never came back. Everyone behind teletext gone. They had to find new things. And I think with everything we've spoken about, it's going to happen. So our literacy piece is just get on with it. Like, don't be a bystander to the next year.
It's the opportunity of our generation.
Absolutely. Well, if you don't, we'll put a link to the in the show notes to your report so people can download that. Sounds really helpful.
And I think the other thing around AI literacy is we've spoke a lot about you and the individual, but if your stakeholders aren't on board, it's going to be impossible. So I think it's not just you going on this journey, but it's is your boss on this journey too? Is your client on this journey too? Because it is happening.
Whether you're on the bus
or not. So I think part of the role is not just upskilling yourself, but kind of helping to upskill other people in your company, other clients, so that they know what's coming and they know how to do it safely and scalably as well. Because I think for a lot of people that I'm talking to, it moves so fast, which is why that podcast that John said is great, because they're tracking this day to day. It's weekly. It gives you those updates, but it moves so fast. I think it's quite overwhelming. And I think what I'm hearing from clients is it is overwhelming. They've never done it before. It's a big change for a lot of people when they're kind of, at the peak of their careers. And if people are scared, they do nothing. And I think we're seeing that in some places. The pharma company I mentioned before, I think that's exactly what's happening there. People are scared of the unknown, so it's a little bit safer just to do nothing. But the world is changing, so we need to upskill ourselves, and we need to make sure that we're upskilling others around us as well.
Great points and advice. I'm keen for you both to share more about the event that you've got coming up. But before I do that, sort of to wrap up this discussion, was there anything that we haven't talked about that you think's particularly relevant for either an agency owner or an agency account manager?
Yeah. The one thing that I was going to say is that point around like the world's changing, and grads now will be using GenAI day to day. So if you want to employ the top grads, which I know all the big pharma companies do, all the big agencies do, they will be expecting to be able to save the company time, save themselves time, deliver high quality work using the tools they know. So if you're not setting yourself up to use GenAI, you won't be attracting the best talent in the future. So that was one of the things that I kind of wanted to cover, because it is coming and people are using it. So
love that. Anything from your side, Jonathan?
That was a really good point.
It was.
I don't know how you
can't have that.
Finally.
That was like I think it's a brilliant close. And, we touched on what the agency of the future looks like. And that's, to build on Kate's point, it's that talent, it's that thinking. And they're going to be the leaders of tomorrow. Like, they're not going to think and operate in the way that, our careers begun and we laddered up, and our ways of working. So like it will be a new future. And it's exciting, but also mildly scary at the same time.
Indeed. So tell us about the event.
You want to go first?
Yeah, so it's a one-day event on GenAI and aimed for people in marketing, comms, and medical. So it's a healthcare-focused event on how to use GenAI. We've got some great case studies there. We've got the agencies that we spoke to that are doing some great stuff. Syneos and Click are on board. They're presenting. We've got So the way we've done the agenda, like the speaker lineup is great. If I do say so myself, it's been built with a lot of love. So it's been built through contacts, through recommendations. So there really are some people doing some great stuff that are joining us. And we've kind of done it I think of it in 3 ways. So when you come to an event, you want to have great networking. So we're making sure there's ample time for that. The coffee's going to be great. The room's beautiful. You want to learn and you want to be inspired. So we've got some big talks, like Google are on board. Google are opening the show with their vision for GenAI in healthcare. So we've got some kind of big inspirational stuff, but we also understand that you want to leave with some like actionable insight. So we've also broken the day with some real like deep dive workshops, some of them on the topics we've discussed. So AI literacy, MLR, so it's going to be a kind of great day, a mix of inspiration, networking, and kind of you'll leave with some tangible stuff too.
Great. And the date and the venue?
March 4th at Events at number 6, which is in East London. Exposed brick, nice coffee, concrete, fresh lighting. It's going to be beautiful.
Big windows.
Big windows.
We're
Love
a fan
it.
of big windows with
Yeah,
our events.
exactly.
Yeah.
Sounds fabulous.
The way we've positioned this, and very similar to how we positioned the Canadian one, was in some forums, and rightly so, will speak at that strategic level. And the speakers will be how it's impacting healthcare, how it's changing. You'll see on the agenda, like the way we've framed it is Google will set that scene, the future of healthcare, and there'll be an element of that from our life science speakers and others. But where we've pushed them and the examples that will come through is much more on the tangibly, this is what companies are doing. So when Ferring, Grunenthal, UCB, Sanofi, they're all speaking, they're not going to be speaking abstractly about AI in healthcare or Gen AI in healthcare. It's going to be, we've done this thing that is delivering this output, and these are our lessons, and these are the next steps within their own kind of, they can't share competitive information. And a lot of what we do with all our events is to push our partners and our speakers to deliver on that. So London's going to be a great day. And if you look at the lineup, you'll see the kind of the different angles, the different therapy areas, the different case studies from the industry's doing at the moment. So for anyone wanting a sense check and a barometer of where the industry is and where they need to be, we recommend you come along.
Listen, any parting words before we wrap up? Anything that I didn't ask you that you'd like to say before we close? You
had a couple of good examples from outside healthcare that I thought were quite fun that you should cover, like an example of Gen AI that's gone bad, for example.
Oh, yeah. We were when we were coming into this, so it's all well and good, and obviously everyone can become a marketeer overnight. And do you remember last year the example of the Scottish lad who did the Willy Wonka experience? So this blew up. So there was...
Cut that out.
There was basically a guy who wanted to make a buck, and he used Gen AI, most likely ChatGPT, I think it was, to create the promotional material for the Willy Wonka experience for children, for 4 or 5 year olds. And all this imagery came out and it looked amazing. As you'd like Charlie, the factory and chocolates and waterfalls and fountains and this one day thing, it was like 25 quid for a child and whatnot. It sold out. The advertising was so great. The copy was so great. And it was in an area where I guess parents at the time in holidays were like, I need to do something with my child. And so he sold out, did really well. Kids were super excited, dressing up and everything. Turns out he didn't have a Scooby-Doo how to implement or put on a Willy Wonka experience. And you look on, it made the BBC News. Yeah. It went viral. We were speaking about it in Canada.
I saw it, but I didn't really know what it was about.
It was a handful of actors in a derelict warehouse and a few terrible props, children crying. And it was actually quite sad because...
And it was expensive as well.
Yeah. I'm sure.
And families would look at... And I, as a parent, that's annoying because these things you invest in and you take your child to and your child's excited.
The kid's expectation,
yeah. And there were stories of kids not sleeping the night before with excitement. And it's a good example of, just in life, don't promise what you can't deliver. But Gen AI enabled him to be... and a pretty good marketeer pretty quick, to the point where he was on par with your Coca-Colas of the world or other brands that you'd be like, that looks like a thing I want to go to. Where a few years ago, he would have been in, Coral Draw doing circles by comparison. So I thought that was a nice example of,
very good.
In uneducated hands, look what can happen. Could he have delivered? He would have made thousands from that thing, and he needed no marketing department there. He needed no copywriters, no creatives. It was good enough at a consumer level to bring hundreds to thousands of people. I think he got arrested, actually. I think they're called.
I don't know about that. I don't know if we should do.
I think the police were on site because parents, it got quite heated. But definitely check that one out. And other, like, I think as well with GenAI, one of the things we didn't speak about, it is more prevalent now everywhere. And I don't think we're aware of it as much. Like, obviously the Coca-Cola ad at Christmas was front and center and got a lot of exposure. But as an example, I was speaking to 11 Labs the other day. They're going to be at the event as well. They're going to join the panel with ITV around kind of new media and what's happening in broadcasting and video. And if you look at 11 Labs in terms of dubbing and translation, and we all think, oh, well, I could upload and get something translated in Google Translate. That's like only 1% of what's possible. Where 11 Labs is, and their tech sits behind a lot of these engines, is the emotion and context within the sentences. So a lot of translation, when it kicks out, can almost feel robotic, especially when you see the avatars. It's like kind of creepy. Where 11 Labs sits with GenAI and kind of speech to text and translation is, you would never know it's AI generated. And just look at some of their demos on their website. Like, and again, it changes the paradigm of, I don't need translators. I don't need like vocal people. I don't need actors and all the rest of it. And like, you could translate this podcast into 50 languages and it would have all the tone and impact and meaning. So you can lip sync and stuff thereafter. And that's there today now.
Yeah.
So
I actually did Hey Jen, and I did Mandarin, and I sent it to my mum. I said, Mum, I'm practicing my Mandarin, and it was just me talking to camera. But you're right, it is phenomenal what it can do, and it's only getting better. We're at the beginnings. I mean, this is as bad as it's just gonna get better.
Yeah.
Listen, thank you both so much.
No,
honestly, I
you.
really enjoyed it.
you.
Such a lively discussion, so much information, so many tips and tricks. Thank you so much. And obviously we want everyone to come to the event because it sounds super, super valuable. And obviously some big name speakers. So thank you again for coming on.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode. I hope you found the conversation with Jonathan and Kate as insightful as I did. And if you're keen to dive deeper into this topic, then don't miss the Age of AI event in London on March the 4th. But if the date has now passed, then go back to their website, the pharmabrands.ca, where they will let you know about future events along this theme. And if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate it, and also share it with your network. And finally, if you'd like to hear which topics are coming up next on the podcast, you can also sign up for my weekly email where I share account management tips, agency news, and updates about any account management trainings that I'm running. So I look forward to speaking to you on the next one.